Have you ever noticed how the mind never truly stops speaking, even in silence, even when the world around you is completely still? The moment you are alone, the moment life slows even slightly, a voice begins to rise from within, speaking endlessly, without pause. Sometimes you call it thought, other times analysis, but most often it is nothing more than the echo of your ego, and the ego despises silence. It fears emptiness because in that stillness you might finally meet yourself. Ibn Arabi once said, "The heart does not speak, the heart only listens." It is either the ego or God who speaks, but never the heart. Yet every time something arises within you, you follow it unquestioningly. We question everything we hear from the outside, yet almost never what comes from within. Every thought, every internal whisper, we assume it is true. But so often it is not. It is just fear, the residue of the past, the anxiety of the future, the mind wrestling with wounds that are unresolved, desires that refuse to die, or fears far greater than yourself. The quieter you become, the louder it all seems. Why? Because your ego believes that if you fall silent, it will vanish. So it keeps you distracted, making you analyze, worry, and imagine 1,000 what-ifs. Just tell me, have you ever paused long enough to truly hear which voice inside you is real? If this spoke to you, like this video, share it with someone seeking inner peace. Comment your reflections below, and subscribe to explore more of Ibn Arabi's mystical wisdom and the journey within. It never lets you settle into now, always dragging you to the past or projecting you into the future, but never ever the present. Because in the present God is, and when you truly meet God, ego must retreat. It cannot stand in that light. So it speaks. It exhausts you. It makes you forget. Arabi said, whenever the voice inside you brings constriction, know that it is not God speaking. It is the ego, because God's voice does not tighten your chest. It does not make you anxious. It does not scare you. It awakens you, but it never destroys you. It whispers. It does not shout. And most often it speaks through silence. Those who come close to truth, they speak less. They fall silent because they know every word can be a veil, every explanation a step further away. And sometimes silence is the highest form of prayer. But silence is hard. We're not ready for it because silence is like standing before a mirror with no escape, no excuse, no one else to blame. In that place, you either cry out for God or run from yourself. There's a space inside you, a hollow you've never quite filled, and that emptiness, it speaks. And when it speaks, you can't bear it. So, you turn on music, scroll your phone, text someone, do anything to distract yourself from that voice. But that emptiness, that space you run from, is your meeting point with the divine, because God doesn't enter a crowded heart. He appears in the emptiness. He arrives only in the silence of an unoccupied soul. Ibn Arabi said, when the mind becomes quiet, the heart begins to hear. Only when you stop speaking, not just with your mouth, but with a constant commentary inside, can truth be heard. And when it arrives, it won't be a sentence. It won't be advice. Sometimes it's just stillness. But that stillness, it holds more wisdom than 1,000 books. And that's when the real transformation begins. Because now you're no longer speaking. You're listening to what? To everything. A leaf falling, a child laughing, the wind brushing past your cheek. And in all of it, you begin to feel his presence. But the mind doesn't want that. It wants to control. It wants to explain, to label, to define. But meaning, real meaning, only comes when the mind goes quiet. Every word is resistance. Every story a form of escape. Every calculation born of fear. And all of it pulls you further from truth. But when the mind becomes still, you no longer blame yourself. You no longer praise yourself either. You just are imperfect, searching, silent. And that is the closest the heart can be to God. But when the mind becomes still, you no longer blame yourself. You no longer praise yourself either. You just are imperfect, searching, silent. And that is the closest the heart can be to God. But you can't hear him because every second a new story begins in your head. Every moment another past is replayed, another future imagined. And your heart, your beautiful tired heart, waits like a lonely child in a crowded room, just waiting for you to be still, to listen, to understand. But you never stop. Not with your mouth and not with your mind. But here's the secret. That voice inside you, it no longer speaks for you. It only speaks for your fears, for your pain, for everything trying to pull you away from yourself. But if one day you truly fall silent, first you'll be uncomfortable. The mind will panic. A strange emptiness will show up and you'll mistake it for something missing. But it's not a void. It's the threshold of divine closeness. If you can cross that threshold, everything will change. You will change because now it's not your mind that speaks. It's your heart that listens. And a heart that truly listens can recognize the voice of God, without words, without sound, without echo. But until your mind grows silent, you will never truly hear, because the mind always interrupts. But if one day you truly fall silent, you'll realize there's another voice inside you, one that has always been there, not to argue, but to awaken. And it was never gone. It was just waiting for you to finally stop. Have you ever truly mastered silence? Not just a pause between words, but a deep silence. No thoughts, no plans, no sentences formed, just sitting, waiting, and no voice comes. Yet a profound peace spreads through you. If you have experienced such a moment, that was God's first gift to you. But what your heart hears is not a word, a lesson, or a piece of knowledge. It's a state, a presence, a gentle touch. Even Arabi says, the heart hears but cannot speak. It is the essence of meaning itself. Therefore the heart does not speak. It only turns towards. And when that turning begins, you no longer want to explain anything. You don't seek to understand. You just want to witness. Suddenly, a door opens inside you. You don't know when or how, but one day you realize there is another presence speaking to you, greater than yourself, but the very one who made you. That presence is called the Lord. He does not speak with words, but enfolds you with his being. When the mind is silent, the heart is no longer empty. It becomes a place of divine unveiling. You are no longer empty, yet you are not full. You are open. And how much you open is how much divine light you receive. Ibn Arabi said the revelation is as vast as the container. The more you are silent, the more you open, and the more you can hear. But if the mind interferes, that openness closes immediately. Because the mind's greatest desire is to capture everything in a sentence. But God is not a sentence. God is not a formula. God is not certainty. God is becoming a flowing state. When your mind becomes silent, you join that becoming. You let go of control, meaning judgment. You become like water, not like a stone. A stone protects itself, but water flows freely, filling every space, taking every shape. Yet its essence remains the same. So the heart becomes like water. Silence turns it into flow, and God flows wherever He wills. Where the mind is silent, questions lose their meaning. You no longer ask why or what next. You simply watch, simply notice. And that noticing is the very essence of worship, because teaches us the greatest worship is to remain conscious. And consciousness is reached not through the mind but through silence. When you become silent, you hear. But this hearing is not with the ears. It is hearing from the depths of the heart. Suddenly you know things you have never been taught. You haven't memorized them. You have simply felt them. That knowledge comes from the ilm al-ladun, the knowledge bestowed directly from the divine. And you enter that knowledge only through silence. Not words, not reading, but through stillness. Because words are veils. Every word chooses one meaning and leaves the rest outside. But silence embraces all meanings. That's why truth hides in silence, not in words. Where the mind is quiet, a state rises from within. Sometimes it is tears, sometimes a deep peace, sometimes simply eyes welling up without a single word spoken. That moment is when your heart touches God, and that touch cannot be put into words. But you recognize it because it is not yours, yet it was made for you. Arabi says, every soul carries a unique divine unveiling. No one else has yours, so your silence is unlike anyone else's silence. The door that opens in your quiet belongs only to you, and what you see behind that door is what God is telling you. But you cannot explain it to anyone, because explaining lessens it. That is why the people of truth speak very little. Whatever they say falls short. Sometimes saying nothing means saying everything. The mind cannot understand this. The mind wants to explain, but the heart only wants to carry. Where the mind is silent, mercy is born. Mercy for yourself, mercy for others. Because now you no longer wish to fix anyone. You no longer wish to convince anyone. Everyone has their own path, and that path does not open until they become silent. Truth is open to all, but visible only to the silent. The mind speaks, but the heart recognizes. When you become silent and things begin to open inside, know this is your inner door, and what lies beyond it has always been reserved for you alone. No one else can enter with you. You cannot reach it with knowledge. Only silence can lead you through. And once you pass through, the world will never look the same again. People will not seem the same. Time will no longer flow the same because you will begin to hear Him in everything. The mind may remain unchanged, but the one who sees has changed. You no longer look at the world. You turn to the one who shows it. And that turning is the greatest awakening. When the mind falls silent, a peace arises. But first a void appears. And that void is often frightening, because the stories your mind has told for years begin to fade away. Every sentence of self-blame, every thought that judged another one by one, they dissolve. You are left naked without any excuse, without any protection. But that nakedness is not something to fear because God loves you most in that very state. Arabi says, the servant comes before God naked, without knowledge in hand, without defense, only with surrender. At that moment of silence, the ego tries to speak once more. It tries to scare you. It calls silence emptiness. It calls it loneliness. But it does not know that in that silence, God is present. And being alone with God is deeper than any crowd. After a while, questions begin to cease. You no longer ask, what will happen? You no longer doubt, am I doing right? Because a calm arises inside you. A calm that whispers, everything is as it should be. That whisper cannot be put into words, but it is a sound only the listener hears. And you realize God has always been speaking to you, but you never stopped talking. Your mind in its noise has drowned out his stillness. Arabi says, "The heart hears not when ready, but when silent, because readiness is the mind's work, but silence is surrender." When you no longer struggle, when you no longer try to change things, when you simply accept what is, that is the heart's opening to God. And that opening transforms everything. Your fears begin to fade. Your jealousy loses its meaning. Your races become meaningless because now you know you are enough with Him. Silencing the mind is not about thinking nothing. It is about laying everything down and finding yourself fully exposed, no longer burdened by the past, no longer anxious about the future. Only the present remains the center of the whole universe, the place where time is transcended and the heart reaches timelessness only through silence. When the mind is silent, not only thoughts but desires quiet down. You don't say "let it be." You say if it happens it is beautiful, and if it doesn't, you do not lose your beauty. This is true knowledge, beyond information. Arabi says knowledge speaks, but true understanding is silent, because true understanding is not something the knower carries. It is the state of being one with the known. You no longer carry knowledge. You have become the known. You are no longer the listener. You are the heard, and in that state your speech belongs only to God, because you have vanished. Only He remains. Only He is seen. Only He is felt. From this point forward, you no longer strive to change yourself, because you have already transformed. You no longer fight your mind because it has become a friend. You no longer resent your ego because it is now a servant. And the world is no longer a burden, but a mirror. Every event teaches you something. Every person shows you yourself. Every silence reminds you of God. When the mind is silent, the heart becomes the mirror of truth. The one who looks into it sees their own depths. But in that depth there is nothing but God. You too have vanished. You have dissolved. But this vanishing is not destruction. It is the very essence of truth. Because when you disappear, He appears and yourself melts into His unity. Ibn Arabi calls this the station of annihilation. But this annihilation is not loss. It is reunion. The moment your mind falls silent, that reunion begins, because your words end and His word begins. Yet He does not speak. He simply is, and you witness His being in every breath, every glance, every moment. This witnessing is the purest form of worship. To remain without words, without demands, just standing and observing. That is why, when the mind is silent, the heart does not speak. The heart too becomes silent. But this silence is not closing. It is opening. You are no longer closed. You are open to everything, every word, every state, every sound. Because now you judge nothing, you only know. And in everything, you know Him. And when you see Him, you need nothing else. When the mind is silent, no one can give you anything, because you already have everything. So if one day you can truly be silent and love that silence, know that you have opened to Him. And this opening can bring lifelong silence. But this silence is not muteness, it is depth. When someone looks at you, they feel a weight. But that weight is not a burden. It is peace. Just tell me. Have you ever experienced a silence so deep that it felt like reunion with something beyond yourself? If this touched your heart, like this video, share it with seekers of inner peace. Comment your reflections below, and subscribe to explore more of Ibn Arabi's timeless mystical wisdom.